Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Kate, and welcome to Redux. Yeah, it's really cool how it aligned with the theme of sanctuary this month, because it does serve as a sanctuary for creatives, for artists, for students, all of us, of course, fall into each one of those categories. So I'd like to take a minute, maybe for my own benefit, to just go ahead and take a deep breath collectively. So we'll inhale and exhale. Okay, here we are. So Redux as a sanctuary, the idea is we're going to start there because it's where we are. But then I'd like to get really big with this concept of sanctuary, and it was fun that we started out with the exercise of each acknowledging what sanctuary is to us. Because just like any good thing, it varies. It varies for each of us, and it varies at different stages in our lives. Different places or people serve as sanctuary. So we're going to get like really big with it, and then we're going to get kind of cellular and conceptual about this idea of sanctuary. So Redux, we'll go back to the first one, please. Redux is celebrating our 20th anniversary. And just a little background about the organization for those of you who might be new to the space. We've been in this space for just a few years now, and prior to this we were over on St. Philip's. We currently house 40 artists. We have 40 artists actively here every day working. So you can imagine the energy that comes with that. You can imagine the trust that the artists have to put in this space. And I really, as I've been thinking about the word sanctuary obsessively for the past 2 weeks, I really keep coming back to that. It's a matter of a sanctuary has to provide, there's a level of trust needed for a place to be considered a sanctuary, not just like a shelter, right? So it's about trust, and it also, I've found, is a place that allows someone to tap into that deepest part of themselves. So whether it's their divine, whether it's their most creative self, you have to have enough trust in that space and feel held to access those places. So that's kind of what we'll see as the through line as we move through, and that's very much what we experience here at Redux. So as I mentioned, we have our studio artists, we have lots of education opportunities. We have 3 galleries that rotate about every 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks. And currently, if you take a moment to look around, maybe another deep breath, this is the work of the School of the Arts students, 9th to 12th graders. Yeah, right. And I think it's really cool to consider most of these students, this is the first time that their work has been hung. And to see their response has just been incredible. The support of the community rallying around them. So seeing the galleries as sanctuary too, and in this case, like a really tender sanctuary for these budding artists. It's been really beautiful to hold this space for them during this exhibition. So thinking about Redux as sanctuary, a place where you can come, a place where you feel held enough, you can tap into that deepest part of yourself, and then ultimately create and share and exhibit, and then the cycle starts again. So if we go to the next slide, however, if we get really big about this concept of sanctuary, there's one that we all share. If we think about like universal sanctuary, and for all intents and purposes, at this point, there's no way out of this sanctuary. It holds us all, right? So thinking really broadly that we're held in these spaces. But then, if we move to the next slide, we can start to consider this notion of sanctuary. A lot of times, again, when we start to first just kind of mull over this word, sanctuaries as a space for those that are vulnerable, space for animals maybe that need protection, right? Like an elephant sanctuary, a bird sanctuary. This is an image of Walton Ford's that I just love, representing that, caring for all living beings, all creatures in sanctuary. And when we started talking about nature as sanctuary, the beach, things like that, places like that. So sometimes, yes, the universe as sanctuary, and then yes, the wild And then sometimes, really as a result of the human use of the planet, we create these sanctuaries for animals. So kind of bringing it in. We've got this wild space. And then, if we go to the next slide, we can think of sanctuaries for the living. So think about churches and temples. Think about sanctuaries for the dead. Think about pyramids. And what we'll realize is that the innermost part of these built structures, so now we've gone from big, we're tightening it up and thinking about built structures and how they hold space, how people move through and access that space. Again, all with the intention of reaching that innermost, that deepest spot, whether it's connecting with the divine, connecting with your most creative self. So here's the sanctuary in the Temple of Horus. And when I started looking at this, I love buildings, and I'll get to that. But when I started, I've always loved this map of the studios of Redux. Yeah. So these are our corridors. Here's the main gallery where we are now. And I started looking at this as sanctuary. What's the innermost, deepest part? And it's gallery 1056. And that is a space that's always reserved for a Redux studio artist to exhibit. So it's cool to consider too when we think about like the heart or the kind of central part, that's the space that we hold, always hold for our studio artists here. Moving on to the next slide. So we think about sanctuary, again, referencing built structures like churches and temples, again, usually in that, with that blueprint of the sanctuary being held in the center. You move in and in. It's a progressive movement into that place. The idea being that you're establishing more and more trust and entering deeper into the structure, the built environment, but also into oneself. And these are sacred spaces. They're protected by law, right? I love this photo of William Eggleston's of the interior of a church. It was taken in 1970. And then if we move on to the next slide, another example of somewhere that's kind of at this point a cross between a sanctuary, a built environment, and a place that's been given over to the wild. And it's Old Sheldon Church down in Yemassee. And this is an oil painting that my grandmother painted in the 50s at some point. She herself, a sanctuary in the flesh, and we will get to that as well. So tightening it up, we're talking about the built environment now. And I attended this summer seminar at the Museum for Early Southern Decorative Arts, MESDA, in Winston-Salem a million years ago. I was working at Drayton Hall at the time. And the whole summer was a field school committed to the study of decorative arts, fine arts, and architecture. And there was this really fun and lively debate throughout the summer from our architecture professor who says, the things created, the decorative arts are made to fill the structure. The architecture itself is the art. And the flip side of that, of course, is no, the structures are built to house the created work, right? The art itself. I'm going to leave that one right there because I've been for 15 years now going back and forth about that. It's a symbiotic relationship is where I land every time. It's like a chicken or egg situation. So with that in mind, I'll also reference, I'll bring it into, we've talked about housing, creating sanctuary for the living, creating sanctuary for the dead. And here at Redux, we create sanctuary for the living, the artists, and also the work, the created. So I'd like to move on to the next slide here. Oh yeah, this is back to the pyramid. A cartoon by Ashley Brilliant. But we'll go to the next slide. Jerry Saltz, the famed art critic for New York Magazine, was here a few months ago, and some of you might have seen him speak. Steph and I went together, it was awesome. And he takes real issue with like museum design. He's really been on a kind of attack lately about how the architects' egos get in the way of the display of the art and the respect of the artists themselves. And when we think about these sanctuaries for the created, this is something really important. And it does go back to that question of which came first, how do these places serve each other, the built environment and then the art that's created and paying homage to it inside. And one of my very favorite architects, of course, is Frank Lloyd Wright. And this is an image of the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And something that I really love about his space and each of his buildings I've been in create a sense of sanctuary is because of his practice of compression and release. So in here, in the Guggenheim, when you enter the building, it's really tight. The ceilings are low. It makes you like breathe in. It feels almost like a hug, you know. Some people say it causes like unnecessary tension. But either way, that's the idea. Because then, when you walk into the heart, the sanctuary, the center of this structure, boom, you're free again. You've got all of this space to get broad with, to see the art. And if you do it just right and start at the top, then he easily guides you like from the heavens all the way back down with this really subtle sense of grounding, again, right back into the sanctuary, the center, the heart of that building. So we've moved from the universe into these the wild environments, the built environments, built for the living, built for the dead, built for the creative. And if we go one more slide, will you do the next one? We can consider we have to consider, of course, the sanctuary that we walk around in all the time, right? The body as sanctuary. But we don't always treat it that way, right? We can be mean to it, we can be abusive of it, we can feel not at home in it, we can feel like a stranger to it. So we've since the beginning, found ways to tap into that's most central part through practices like movement practices and meditation that allow us to access that when all we want to do is look out for sanctuary. We have these practices so that we can tap into sanctuary. And there's a practice of yoga, a style of yoga, Katona, and they actually refer to the body as a home and the different kinds of areas of the body as rooms. So again, considering that like innermost sanctuary of the body. And when we're in alignment, we can really find that creativity, that connection with the divine. And a lot of times it's these built environments and communities that allow us to get there. So finally, the concept of sanctuary. Maybe it's not even here, maybe it's not even here, maybe it's just an idea. And it's accessible anywhere to anybody, anytime. Maybe you don't need that structure to have that trust. And when I think about Redux and I think about our move over here, it was interesting. We had a meeting last night, and it's the same concept. It's a totally different building. You move through it in a different way. Artists access it in a different way. It feels accessible or inaccessible to the public in different ways. But Redux is still here, right? So if we think conceptually, it could go anywhere. And Creative Mornings is a good example of that too. It can go anywhere, and it still holds space, and it still serves us all in this way. Or in the unique way it serves each of us. So I'm going to read one of my favorite examples of this is in the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Anybody know it? It's so good. Definitely worth the read. And Phaedrus, who is the narrator, the main character, he is a professor. And there's concern that their university is going to lose accreditation. And his students are freaking out. And they're like, oh, if the university is not accredited, then none of our work here matters, And in his lecture, the Church of Reason lecture, he says that the university has no specific location. It owns no property. The real university is a state of mind. So the real sanctuary is a state of mind. The real university is nothing but the continuing body of reason itself. So again, just this conceptual idea, yeah, it can be a place, and sometimes we need a place that we can walk into to create, or to worship, or to be in community with one another. Sometimes in this back and forth relationship we have with this sanctuary, that can vary as well. But there is this idea that I definitely subscribe to, that sanctuary can be anywhere, and it can be a gathering, and it doesn't always have to look the same. It's going to evolve naturally. And I had a picture of Mission Yoga up too, because that was another really good example of a place. That place still exists, man. We don't have a studio there anymore, but it still exists to many of us who practiced there for years and years. And then finally at the end, that's an example of the Katona, the body as house, the abode of the spirit, and how each part of us functions as each of these rooms. You have like these necessities, this room for like an observatory at the top, the boiler room way down here in that first chakra, and keeping the house clean, keeping it clear, and that means different things to us at different times too. But it's again just that idea of chakras being energy, being able to move, creative energy, kundalini energy, spirit, allowing that to be able to move freely, much like the buildings are designed, so that they're accessible, they feel safe, you have trust, you understand how they work. And bringing it back to Redux, I think these will be our last 2 slides. Oh yeah, another Ashley Brilliant, hiding away, finding sanctuary, for fear of actually being out there. And then the next one, yeah, that looks like a sanctuary, doesn't it? It's here in Redux. So again, just keeping in mind, it's gonna mean different things to us at different times in our lives. These spaces serve different people in different ways. And there are a lot of approaches to, we could go on and on, about approaches to sanctuary and what that feels like and what it needs to be. But ultimately, I would consider that Redux has a physical space, but there's also a sense of holding space. There's a sense of community. There's a trust that you can really tap in, and that you're going to have support in community here to create, to dive deeper, to exhibit, to share. Kate has a chill art critique monthly that serves people in a way that, again, it's that tender kind of sanctuary for folks. So, and I think we have one more image, and it's, I just love it so much, Julia Deckman's Big Bertha. It's so good. So that's kind of all I have.